Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the the Devil's Advocate podcast. I knew I'd butcher it. I knew I'd butcher it eventually. Welcome to the Devil's Advocate podcast. Obviously, here on this Friday evening, we're here to talk all things Manchester United. Obviously, especially the Rasmus Hojlund deal. We're going to chat about that. Also, we're going to chat about the ownership situation as well with the takeover and the delay of that, how that could potentially hinder us going forward. And also, as well, we will talk about kind of our transfers, player sales, and the upcoming season as well. Also joined by Mr. Phil Brown as well from Beyond the Pitch. Phil, how are you?
Doing good, kid. How are you?
Good, good, good. Look, it's Friday. It's the weekend. United are playing on Sunday in Dublin, so looking forward to the weekend. Kind of seeing United twice this week, so it's all good.
Very good, mate. Yes. Obviously, I've spent the last week and a half watching United myself in San Diego and obviously in Las Vegas. I might have done a few other things in Las Vegas, which, in order to not self-incriminate, I will say nothing more.
Yeah, look, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, as they always say. But
So,
obviously, look, you actually mentioned, look, before we dive into Highland, you mentioned you're out in obviously San Diego and you're out in Vegas watching United. What was the vibe like pre-season? Obviously, being around the camp, being around the games. Obviously, one was Wrexham, one was Dortmund. What was the kind of feeling around the pre-season games and kind of the preparation for the team?
yeah, I mean, look, it was quite positive, to be honest. You could see the difference that Ten Hag is making with discipline, with players, with the whole organisation of the tour. I mean, he was fighting a fight that Mourinho was fighting, where he was trying to limit, the commercial activities. There's certainly a lot less of it this year. A lot more coordinated this year into single events rather than multiple events. A lot less sponsorship events. A lot less of that. There was much more focus on football. What I thought was quite interesting was United playing under 23 games essentially. I remember back in 2004-5 when United came here, and they were heavily criticised. 2004 was for not bringing their first team, and it was after the Euros. Van Nistelrooy and Scholes and Keane all had to fly out to play AC Milan in New York because a lot of the squad was younger. And so this time there was, Ten Hag, as he said when he took over the football club, was he wanted direct control of the under 23s as well, and you could see that what was being done was Ten Hag having oversight on the under 23s as well, and making sure everybody got good game time, making sure that he got to take a look at the levels of young players, where they're at, and having really direct oversight on that. I remember when Van Gaal came to United and he was asked if he was going to have anything to do with the academy under 23s, and he said no. Ten Hag wanted to make sure that there's symmetry between the first team, the under 18s, under 23s, and that they all play the same way, so that they're producing players capable of being put into a first team that can adapt to the system that he plays. So I think in that sense it was encouraging, because we, as he quite rightly said before the tour, you want to see a couple of players emerge that will push into the first team, and I think we saw that with Kobbie Mainoo. We obviously unfortunate that he get injured, but impressed in the games that he did play. And there was a couple of others that I thought did well. In the Wrexham game, I thought Hannibal Mabry stood out by far as the best player. You could see he benefited a lot from that loan at Birmingham, physically, and because he was getting kicked left and centre and he just kept asking for the ball, and so you could see he's developed physically and technically. And young Alvaro Fernandez, I would say, of the first team in the last game, in the Dortmund game, I thought Jadon Sancho was excellent, very, very encouraging. And so yeah, the results weren't great, but I'm not sure that's how you scale whether you've had a successful pre-season or not. I mean, United had a very successful pre-season last season when it lost the first two games. They had good development and individual performances. Some of the things that were missing in the games that they lost were a central striker, obviously. And I think, Hojlund is very young. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But I think what Manchester United are different football clubs since Ten Hag took over. Different control mechanisms, different control parameters from the top, different performance metrics about whether you get to stay at United or not. It's not based on commercial value or anything like that. It's based purely on football value, and I think It's not a guarantee that you're going to catch City with these methods, but I don't think you can catch them without United being run like a proper football club.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, look, and it's great to see, like, from that perspective, that we're kind of run more like a football club than as Van Gaal said, like a commercial club. And look, the youngsters actually did impress me during this preseason. Like you mentioned, Alvaro Fernandez, thought he's very direct. Omari Forson as well.
Yeah,
I thought
Omari
looked
good.
very bright as well the other night. And you kind of seen Ten Hag have the conversation when afterwards when he got taken off. It was a very kind of long conversation. But he's someone who actually impressed me as well. I think, though, he's probably going to play majority on the 23s this year, because when we look at the options on the right and left side, depending on injuries, he mightn't get a chance. But he is a promising young player, and obviously, like, the standout was Kobbie Mainoo. But like, look, when he comes back from injury, like, depending on who leaves, I'd say he'll have a breakout season. I think, like, if you look at the last couple of years, you've had Elanga breakout. You've had obviously Garnacho last year. You'd like to think now Mainoo will be the one this year, though, to have his breakout year. But yeah, like, from a preparation standpoint, thought it was good to see Onana in goal. Obviously, we're kind of becoming a more team proactive, playing out from the back. And yeah, like you mentioned, I think Jadon Sancho will find that bit of spark again. Hopefully something that he can kick on next season, because I think if you're looking at Jadon now, this is his third season at United. I think he really does need to kick on now. When you consider, like you talked
Yeah, I
about a
would
minute
agree
ago,
with that.
about we're kind of going away from overpaying on players and stuff like that. At the moment, right now, since David De Gea left the club, Jadon Sancho, along with Marcus Rashford, is the highest paid player at the club right now. So, like, if he's gonna earn that wage, he's gonna have to come back into the team this season and make a stamp. And if he can show the versatility he's shown this preseason by playing on the right and playing false nine, then look, I think he's someone who can definitely be a vital player, not just in the squad but also in the starting 11 this season.
No, I agree, and I think Jadon Sancho. When you look at the fact that other players are on a much shorter leash now, you don't get 2, 3, 4 bad seasons at United and still get to keep your place. I think Jadon Sancho knows that this really is the last year that he'll get to impress. And look, I do believe he needs a proper number 9 to get the best out of him. I've believed pretty much from the start of last season that he is not a winger. It was interesting to see how Ten Hag played him as a false 9. I think if you look at his seasons at Dortmund, I mean, in Haaland's first season, Sancho had more goals and assists than Haaland. Now, you'd expect him to have more assists, but I do think there's a much better player in there than what we've seen. Whether he's suited the Ten Hag system, we don't know. That's what he's going to have to answer this season, as to whether he can adjust his game to be compatible with that system. But I think with a central number 9, a proper number 9 of world class quality, whether that's Rashford or whether it ends up be Hojlund part of the time, I think he will benefit. I think he'll benefit from the confidence, from assists. If you're a player like Jadon Sancho, you're being judged on assists. It's a 2-part story. It depends also on the quality of the finishing. And when you're creating chances and someone's not taking them, you're not getting the assist as well. And that affects the player's confidence. So I think with a much higher conversion rate, Jadon Sancho will get confidence from that too. And I think this will be the best United team Jadon Sancho's played in, the best environment that he's playing at United. And I think this really will be the year where we find out about the direction of Jadon Sancho's career.
Definitely, and look, if you're looking at the number 9s, like you're right, because the only time I've seen him have any bit of a resemblance of a relationship with a number 9 was kind of when Rangnick came in for that little period where him and Ronaldo had a bit of a partnership. Other than that, then Martial's been injured. Weghorst, like, as much as he was great, had great work rate, just couldn't put the ball into the back of the net. And yeah, he hasn't had that kind of figure. But when I look at Hojlund and I look at how he moves, how he links up playing, how direct he is, I think, like again, I'm not going to compare him to Erling Haaland. I'm not going to go on that Sky Sports clickbait route that we've been seeing all week. I've seen about 87 comparisons between Hojlund and Haaland all week. But like, having a focal point up there, having someone strong, big, and who can bring people into play but also be direct, I think that will help Jadon a lot. I actually think it'll help Anthony a lot as well in terms of how he brings players in play and how direct he can be as well. But you're right. I think, again, you can't get 3 or 4 bad years at United. You need to be on it, especially in this new kind of, I suppose, rootless kind of regime that Erik Ten Hag has.
Well, I just don't think it's also about Eric Ten Hag. I think it's about
Yeah,
knowing that United need to sell at the right time. If you're having one, two, three bad seasons, that's a depreciating asset.
yeah,
So I think for United, they can't afford financially to let players do that anymore. So if you let players stay too long to do that back to back to back, they become impossible to shift. I mean, what chief scout or football directors looking at a player that's had two, three, four bad seasons on massive amounts of money, saying he's the answer to our problem? You have to know when to sell. This is something that Ferguson did really, really well. He was often questioned on his sales and who he sold and why he sold them, because they were very popular players at the time. But he noticed some gradual, minuscule decline that maybe you and I wouldn't have seen. Knew when to sell them, and this is always evidenced by the whole Ince Hughes Kanchelskis season. You wouldn't have been alive, but I remember it. And there was numerous examples when Ferguson knew when to sell a player, which was often when against the fans' wishes, because fans wanted to keep these players. But Ferguson obviously was able to notice that decline and when to sell them. And I think this is something they'd have to be better at. So I think as the football club is run properly as a football club, those decisions will be made much faster.
yeah. And again, like, look, I think at the moment we're finding, like, I know we're going to talk about player sales, we may as well talk about it now. Like, I think the reason why we're having such a hard time selling players right now is because of the previous regime and how like you said, inflated wages they're on, how many bad seasons they've had, and the reputation they kind of have now like precedes them almost. Like if you look at Maguire, he's on. Well, I know, like, look, he's had a tough time. He's on 250,000 a week. You know, even if let's say West Ham come in at 20, 30 million, you're talking like how much of a wage cut Harry Maguire going to take? Now I know West Ham probably have a few quid now because of the Declan Rice money, but equally, they're going to have to spread that out to kind of build their squad for losing such a good player. You look at McTominay, he's on a decent wage as well. Even though, to be fair, I'd actually think he's a decent player in his own right. Like like if you're talking about Declan Rice replacement at West Ham, he probably suits that profile as well. Big, strong midfielder. There's other players in there. Dean Henderson is one of the highest paid number twos in world football, if not the highest paid number two. If you're actually looking at a metric of all the number two keepers in world football right now, he's probably one of the highest paid. I think he's on like 140, 160 grand a week. This is all under Ed Woodward's watch at the time. Right now it's hard for us to shift players because of how badly we were run previously. And
Yeah, it's a bit. Keane, and yeah, Ed Woodward obviously takes responsibility, but ultimately the responsibility lies with Joe Glazer.
yeah,
Joe Glazer signs off on everything. I mean, I can understand him not knowing the value of players that they're going for, but surely he should have some idea of what the market rate is for players that they're keeping. And when you're in negotiations and you're going to hand someone like David De Gea 375 grand a week, you only do that if someone else is going to do it, and you run the risk of losing the player. Otherwise, what's the point? So there's plenty of dirty hands in this. Brandon Williams was going to go to Southampton last season, and Brandon Williams ended up not going because he would have been one of the highest paid players at Southampton if Southampton had taken him on loan and paid his wages, which is just insane. So, this is right through a team where players are being paid wages that aren't commensurate with the market value. There's no incentive. This is how you get bad dressing rooms where players aren't incentivized to improve, and it makes them very difficult to move on because they're not stupid. They know they're being paid above their market value, and clubs are not willing to make the same mistakes United have made. So yes, definitely becomes harder to move them on. This doesn't apply to top players because top players know they'll get top money anywhere, and they'll know that when they leave whatever club, like Ronaldo certainly wasn't worried about his wage when he left United. Top players don't sit on the bench because they're making a lot of money. Players that are overpaid do. Yeah, it gets hard to move them. There's also players don't want to put in transfer requests because there's loyalty bonuses and everything they forsake for that, so there's a game going on. But people need to also remember it's the job of the agent to bring United offers for their client, not United to go out and solicit offers. It doesn't work like that. We'll communicate to the agent of a player, this is how much we'll let them go for, this is a rough estimate of their value, bring us offers in this ballpark, and it's up to them to do that. if the client wants to leave, then they will. If they may not be able to do it. But, you need to criticism of the Alex Telles deal and all that. I mean, if someone came in and offered 20 million for Telles, they'd have taken it. But they can't accept offers they don't have. And again, it's not United's job to go out and get offers for players. Obviously, there's players that aren't being offered around. The clubs will come and offer a premium fee for that agents don't go out and solicit. But when you're trying to get rid of players because they don't fit what you need or stuff like that, all the advantages with the buyer. And so it never works that way in reverse, because United are usually trying to pick off clubs' best players that have had a successful season, so they have a whole different value. So, but when you're buying players of football clubs that have had 3, 4, 5 bad seasons, all the advantage is with the buyer, because you need these people to take them off your hands. So look, it even happened with Pogba. They should have sold Pogba a year before. Should never have let him go on a free. But this is the ineptitude that infested the football club, that really has prohibited Ten Hag's ability to rebuild the squad in a way that he otherwise would have if he's trying to fix problems that are years old. But eventually that will get fixed.
Yeah, look, hopefully with a takeover or whatever, I think that's what we definitely fix. Look, I think even if new owners came in now, they'd have to undo still a lot of damage done by the owners. I think one shining light that we have even under this ineptitude ownership is that we do have I think one of the brightest managers in world football, and I think last year, if you look at the squad and you look at everything he had to deal with, I think he actually probably overachieved and getting third, getting to 2 cup finals, and nearly getting to a point of winning the Europa League as well. I think he was on the verge of really having a very brilliant season. It was just, obviously, I think you could argue the FA Cup final was lost during moments. You could argue, obviously, the Europa League was lost because of our own mistakes. So, I think when you look at the job Erik ten Hag is doing, he's kind of doing it with one hand tied behind his back at the minute, and he's still achieving results, and I think you have to commend him for that. But I think, obviously, when you look at how the club's been run, you look at how certain aspects of the football and operation at our football club, it's disgusting. And look, again, it's down to Avram and Joel not wanting to sell. And
it's a couple of things, but that FA Cup final loss, had United have won that FA Cup final, you might still be sitting with David De Gea and goal. And I honestly think Ten Hag's opinion on De Gea hardened quite a bit the last few weeks. The West Ham situation, where he was poor, obviously. The multiple mistakes in the Sevilla game, and of course the FA Cup final, where you could probably fault him for 2 goals. So the dividend of that is that big decisions were forced upon Ten Hag, not just with De Gea, with other players too. So in some ways I feel that as painful as it was, there might be a positive to come from that. So Ten Hag is both an exceptional manager and coach, right? So some people are really good coaches, not good managers, like Graham Potter. Some people are really good managers and not good coaches, like Ferguson. So I think Ten Hag is both. He's very, very intelligent, and if you watch him in training, he's very, very attack-minded, very positive, wants players to be thinking about everything that they do. Van Gaal was like that too, to be fair, just didn't have the squad to be able to pull off what he wanted to do. They weren't thinking fast enough to implement his style. Ten Hag has obviously brought a number of his own players that can play the way he wants to play, and keeping the ones that are already out United can play the way he wants to play, and getting rid of the ones that don't. And the ones that don't, to me, are obvious, such as Fred, McTominay, who I'm not. They obviously almost fit a Mourinho style. Yeah. So I think Ten Hag knows exactly what he's doing. He's an exceptional manager, and I think probably since Ferguson, he's had more power than any other manager. He's had more control of the football club than any other manager, and that's entirely appropriate.
Yeah, I think, look, the fact that he's been given say, and the fact that he's been allowed to kind of get rid of the players who he's want to get rid of, he's allowed to bring, within reason, bring in the players who he wants to bring in. I dare to say there's a couple of players out there right now that he'd like to bring in, but obviously the budget doesn't allow. But it's good to see that he's starting to get control. And again, I think it's when you look at post Ferguson, look at managers in their prime. He's probably the first one, like young enough to be in their prime and as on the back of a successful season. You can argue Van Gaal came in after finishing third in the World Cup, but it was a long time when he was in club football. Before then, you look at David Moyes, who was kind of a mid-table manager. Ollie came in, had a great interim period. Mourinho had he had a decent spell at Madrid, ended badly. Had a decent spell with Chelsea, ended badly. This is the first manager we've come in that we've appointed post Fergie that's still, obviously he was winning titles in Holland, got to the Champions League semi-final with that Ajax squad. You can see how why there's many United fans when there was an argument last year about him appointing him or Pochettino, like which one we wanted. Everyone was saying Erik ten Hag, and I think that it's paying dividends now that we have appointed him. But we spoke about ownership, Phil, and obviously since last November, anytime we've been on the podcast, we've talked about this potential takeover happening. And there's been different stories every week. Up until probably last 3 or 4 weeks, it's gone a bit quiet. I don't know if that's the NDAs or kicking in or whatever it may be. But obviously, it looks like the takeover process is stalled. Neither Sheikh Jassim or Jim Ratcliffe kind of know what the story is. Obviously, I was talking to Ben Jacobs on here a couple of weeks ago. They're saying the partial investment could still potentially be in play as well. Like, what's your thoughts on kind of what's going on with this takeover process, considering like we're a week out from the season and we're no wiser to what the status of our club is right now?
So basically, you have an impossible situation where you have 6 siblings. When the father bought the football club, this is what he bought it for, so that the 6 siblings can make a lot of money and eventually sell it for a lot of money. And I think 4 of them want to do that. Joel and Avram have a different idea of what they want to do with the football club, and there's never been a clear consensus on what to do. I agree with Ben Jacobs when he says this is always about money, and there is a number that would be reached where the Glazers would sell, but that's always been the case. That's been the case in 2010, 2015, 2020. It's always been about money. It's always been there's a price point that they would sell at, because it's the only true metric that they care about. So the other 4 siblings have wanted to do a complete 100% sale to Qatar, and Joel and Avram, they think there's potential for more money down the line with United being reappraised, getting the bottleneck of the other 4 out of the business so that they could run it in a way that they think it should be run. I don't agree with that. I also don't have any separation, between the 6 siblings, and think Joel and Avram the good guys, the other 4 the bad. Joel and Avram had plenty of opportunity over the last 20 years to, make themselves amenable to United fans, at least make an effort to talk to them. There's a lot of things they could have done that they didn't do, and I don't want them anywhere near this football club. But there's lots of variables on this. You see the Saudi money, and there's 2 ways of looking at that. That's both a threat to United. And look, this was entirely, when you look at what they did with Liv, there's a very predictable trajectory with what the Saudis are going to try to do. And they're going to try to create a Super League.
Super League, yeah.
Of course. But these are things that are still years off. United have immediate needs that still haven't been addressed. The reason why the Glazers put the football club at the market though in the first place, the club was essentially financially on its knees. This is why they didn't spend in January. This is, for me, what cost United the FA Cup, was the fact they had no depth. And probably what cost them the Sevilla tie, because as soon as Martinez got injured, in that game when Rashford got injured, United were in serious trouble throughout the season. They were the only club that didn't spend in January that qualified for Europe. So I think, and the justification for not spending in January was, look, the club will be sold by the summer. So, you have to put up this with one window. Like last season, something changed in the window to where, because the if you go back to pre-Mason Mount, United were pursuing Mason Mount for a couple of reasons. 1, because Chelsea were going to be quite flexible on the terms. 2, because they weren't asking for a lot of cash up front. And I spoke to somebody at United after Mason Mount and said, what's the budget for the rest of the window? And they didn't know. So there's a confidence there somewhere that something is going to change. But obviously the Adidas deal, these things don't happen overnight. Those things take months to do. And so anyone with just a cursory glance at the books would know that deal would have been on the horizon anyway. So I don't think that's a major factor in changing how they think. There's still huge risk. I mean, look, Chelsea will not be Chelsea next season that they were last season. Liverpool will not be Liverpool that they were last season. If United fell outside the top four, which is entirely possible next season, the Glazers would find themselves in a very difficult situation. They'd surrender the balance of power in negotiations to the buyer, because the protest would start, the protest would get frantic, and the Glazers can't afford that. So I still think something will happen with it, simply because the reasons why they put the club on the market in the first place still haven't been addressed. As far as partial investment goes, here's the thing about partial investment. The type of investment that the Glazers would need to do the things that they want to do is more than what the club's worth. I mean, if I put my house on the market for 500 grand, someone walks in and I say, tell you what, mate, give me $1.5 million, we'll do the place up and we'll share ownership. Well, what would I do that for when I can buy it for $500,000? Why would I do that? I mean, and the Glazers certainly aren't going to dilute equity in Manchester United to reinvest all that money. Because whatever they do, they'd have to, they have to give away they'd have to buy out the other four siblings, which is essentially what Jim Ratcliffe is offering to do. If you're an investment company, you're not a football fan, you're an investment fan. And there's lots of other better investments than football where you get a better return and a more guaranteed return, where you don't have to put up with fanatical fans online berating your staff. People don't need that. And most investment companies want anonymity. Listen, I've worked with investment venture capitalist companies when they invest in your company. And let me tell you what they do. They usually want about a 3 or 4 year turnaround before they flip it. They run everything down to the last penny. They cut every unnecessary cost. They treat people like shit because they don't care whether you stay or go. And they inflate every cost possible. So if they look at United's ticket prices and go, you know what? I don't care whether fans are happy or not. We're going to charge an extra £50 a ticket. Right? Because we know that people will pay it. They'll do that. I'll give you a perfect example of that. I mean, Las Vegas. Las Vegas used to be really affordable, and the corporatization of Las Vegas came. Instead of using gambling as the resource for profit, they now price gouge on absolutely everything because they know that they can. Because this is about making quick money. So no one is investing in United because the potential for return is on things like qualification for the Champions League is not guaranteed. They're going to look for guaranteed revenue, and that's going to come in things like shirt sales, it's going to come in things like ticket prices, it's going to come in things where they're already getting guaranteed revenue. So they don't really care how people feel because they're not in it for the long term. So I really think that short-term investment, which the Glazers have been trying to get since 2020 about the four siblings, is still, for me, the least likely of all the things that would happen. I'd be amazed if some investment company would want to get involved in that. The risks are too great. So, it will depend on whether the Qataris want to hit a price point where all six of them can't say no. But I understand their reticence because it's already massively overpriced. And if United start the season badly, which could very well happen. I mean, if you look at United's first 4 or 5 games, they're not easy.
Like our first 3 away games are really tough games.
Yeah,
even the home ones are dodgy as well.
Yeah, so if United start the season badly, which very well could happen, the Glazers are playing a very risky game. If I was a potential buyer, what's another few months? Because it's going to be, there's a reason why United can't replace TeamViewer on their shirt, right? If they could, they would have already. And anyone that says these protests don't work don't realise that the sponsors are playing a different game than the Glazers. The sponsors are paying for fan equity. They're paying for fans to buy their stuff. When your main consumer has a toxic relationship with your brand, that partnership is worth nothing. So make no mistake about it. Sponsors who have the option of going anywhere are not paying Manchester United for brand association whenever the people they're selling to don't like them. So, and sponsors are very, very accessible these days online. So it's not like it was 2010 where, sponsors were, the CEOs and all the people that run these companies were hard to reach. Not anymore. So I still
Literally
think
anyone's email address you can
yeah.
literally get online these days.
By the very nature of sponsorships, you don't do them in silence. You have to promote them. You have to come out. Otherwise, what's the point? And so it's a very, very difficult issue, and it's a tightrope for the Glazers. So I honestly still think for them, it's going to be a very difficult genie to put back in the bottle. Rock up the Old Trafford and go, you know what, forget we did that, and think that would be okay. I also feel that if they did do that, then tried to sell United a year later or something like that, I don't think they get anywhere close to the offers they're getting right now, and they find it hard to entice parties. I would also believe to pull out of any type of deal, they'd have to pay Rain quite a bit of money on a consultancy fee. So there's a major cost to not doing anything. There's a major cost to whatever decision they make, and ultimately they'll make the one that's best for them, not Manchester United. But I still don't think that. I think the one thing that won't happen is nothing. If you know what I mean.
I think something will definitely have to happen. I think that the nature of it, I think right now, especially from fans' perspectives, right now it's been too drawn out. Like the fact is, it was November when the World Cup started last year. We got that news that the Sailor investment was going to happen, and we're now in August 2023, and nothing's happened yet. And like you said, like potential owners can maybe look at United start and say, "Why wait? We can wait an extra 3 months. See how the season starts, and don't maybe play our cards then." I think just obviously, look, we've seen the great work the 58 are doing at the minute, and we've seen there's a lot of plans put in place for fan protests. You see now how it's not just match going fans, but it's also worldwide fans now having an impact. And we're seeing stuff like obviously protests before games. Now we're seeing sit-ins during the games. Like this, like you look at the censorship, the broadcast, like the Glazers are trying to censor fans through broadcasters as well. We've seen Sky Sports, BT, what TNT, what they're calling now. You've seen the recent interview the 58 had with Simon Stone. The BBC edited 22 minutes out of it, trying to make the Glazers out to be good people. Like these are they're vanity merchants. That's what they are. That's what the Glazers
Well,
are.
I mean, look, they're trying to control the message because to those that aren't intimately connected to the club, they want to be able to spin a story and say that this is just a silent minority of hooligan football fans. This is not, analogous to how all Manchester United fans feel. This is not part of mainstream media. This is just, like all football fans, it has a small ultra element to it. But because this is what I'm saying with sponsors. I mean, how do you convince, most people that are CEOs of companies are not intimately connected to fan culture, and so they're not, they're not truly aware of why fans are protesting. And also American sports culture is very, very different.
Yeah.
American sport and culture, most people out here are totally confused as to why United fans have a problem with the Glazers, because to them, well, of course they're going to take money to your football club, of course they're going to asset strip it, that's what they do. Here it's different because they are franchise businesses. They're not rooted in their community. The relationship to the community is completely different. And they accept the raw monetization of everything is inevitable. So eventually it'll get that way in the UK too. But as cultures change and as especially how quickly it's evolving. But for us, for people that grew up with football as actual clubs, representative of the community and culture that mean more to them than just, some people support the team, some people support the club. Fans who support the club have a totally different relationship with the club and care about things that transcend the result. So it's hard to explain that to an American because they don't understand that. Because this is how you can move a franchise out here from one city to the next. It's totally different. It's also a massive country, so you have huge demographic shifts out here. Very few people are from the area that they live in. I mean, in my street alone, I don't think there's anyone that grew up here. So, it just is a transient community. It's totally different. But I mean, you look at United played in Vegas at the Raiders Stadium. They went from LA to they were Oakland to I think they moved in the middle of the country and into Vegas in the last 20 years. So you could never do that in football. But the reasons, like I said, the reasons why they put the club in the market are still there. And if the Glazers didn't need money, they never would have put United on the market.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think what they're trying to do now is trying to squeeze every last penny they can and try to get the biggest price.
Well, they've always been doing that, man. I mean, look, it's always been the goal.
Yeah, that's always been the goal. And I think it just depends. This could, like this play that they're doing now could backfire essentially on them. Because like you said, if we have a bad start to the season, valuation goes down, like especially if you look at other clubs who are also looking for either investment or you look at the Joe Lewis situation with Spurs as well. There's clubs like Spurs and Liverpool where maybe potential buyers may even look at them. Like Liverpool have the infrastructure there. If they get the right owner, they could really skyrocket. Spurs have great infrastructure there, the stadium and the training ground, and there's other clubs out there who are marketable that can be bought.
Well, one of the problems with the Saudis, mate, is the Saudis are outside the jurisdiction of UEFA, so it's really difficult to curtail. Yeah, it's really difficult to curtail their spending. So when they start pushing the price up of players, when they start pushing the price up of everything, the Glazers will have to match that. All of a sudden, you'll have players coming in saying, I'm being offered 700 grand a week. What are you going to do? And it's wages that bankrupt clubs, not transfer fees. This is why City had wage payments. It wasn't the fees that were the problem. Fees get amortized. So, this is the big question, is that can European football respond to match the revenues? I mean, Serie A is skint. I mean, Serie A is, there's no money in it. Football needs a strong Serie A, it needs a strong Bundesliga, it needs a strong La Liga. Certainly European football does, for the Champions League to retain its allure. And if those leagues start capitulating financially, you could easily see things change, and the Glazers have to be really, really careful, because it's just as possible, if not probable, but certainly possible, that those revenues could easily decline in European football over the next 5 years. If football starts getting dominated by Manchester City, Champions League, in the same way that the Premier League is, people will just lose interest. The gap will grow, and eventually people are just, what's the point of this? So how they calibrate that to make sure there's competitive balance is going to be very, very difficult, because people like City are standing up and laughing at them and ignoring the rules, because there's so much nuance in the law, and they trust that these lawyers will eventually get them off. They don't care, and eventually football will amend its rules to allow this, because they can't win these battles in court. I mean, I would imagine even the transfer window is not even compatible with European law. I would imagine if a footballer wanted to sue his employer, I mean, apply it in your terms. If your employer said, you can't leave my company and go to another company until January, I mean, legally that's pretty indefensible. A human being can change employers whenever they want, under contract or not. There's no legal justification. That requires participation and buy-in from all your members. I mean, there's so many things that really would be up for challenge legally that could be challenged. But honestly, I do wonder where it will be in five years, because I've heard people in football say that Saudi project is truly unbelievable in its size.
The thing about it is, well, you look at that, how they're doing it out in Saudi Arabia. Like, if they start attracting play, I know Kylian Mbappe is not going to go there, but they start attracting them big names,
Mm-hmm.
them big wages. Despite United's lower, even Real Madrid, who are kind of they were really kind of slotting out for the Super League.
But they
Barca,
will eventually.
yeah,
I
eventually
mean,
even top.
why do you think? How do you think Newcastle finished in the top four last season? How did they finish the year before?
They finished, what was it, 16th or something,
Yeah,
15th,
so
16th.
so and do you think it's a mere coincidence that they were able to attract players to a football club who wouldn't have went the year before, that finished in the top four and got them to a cup final? Manchester City, when United were winning the treble, were in what would be now League One playoff. And now we have kids here running around with City shirts on, right? Of course, eventually, money will dictate what human beings choose to do with their careers. So, of course, eventually, that type of money, you're going to cannibalize other leagues.
Yeah, and again, like, I've seen people even on social media say, like, this can be just Chinese Super League 2.0. It's not that though. The finances behind this are way different compared to what the Chinese Super League was, and obviously they brought in their own regulations, which actually ended up messing up that league, to be a success going forward. But we're talking about successes going forward, though, Phil, and we're talking about players coming in. Obviously, Rasmus Hojlund, most likely, he's probably going to be announced tomorrow at the game, kind of
Yeah.
similar to what we done to Rafa Varane 2 years ago. Obviously, when you look at United's strikers in the last 10 years, we've always signed them at kind of 29, 30. The kind of strikers past their prime, bar Anthony Martial, who's just been injury prone since. How excited are you by having like a young player coming in that actually has development ahead of him, and the fact we've kind of a very good coach in Eric Ten Hag to kind of lead him kind of that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's really the first player United have signed that hasn't been connected to Ten Hag, with maybe Casemiro too, but
Yeah.
where most of the players United are signing in some sense have been connected to Ten Hag. Mason Mount, of course, played against Ten Hag for Vitesse Arnhem, and he's someone that Ten Hag tried to sign before at Ajax. Amrabat is someone, obviously he coached at Utrecht, which I think United will do. Onana was his ex-goalkeeper. I don't need to go through all these, all this already. But his development has been incredible. I mean, this is a kid that wasn't in the Denmark squad for the World Cup. This is a kid that was released by FC Copenhagen. Went to Stan Graz, of course, in Austria, scored a lot of goals, went to Atalanta. And he scored the same goals, the game ratio, as Julian Alvarez did last season, and allegedly the best team in the world. You'd have to say they probably are. There's still a lot of development in Rasmus Hojlund, and he's going to have bad games. He's going to have inconsistent moments. He's going to miss good chances in games, and those are the times when you're going to need to support him, because inevitably, the whole comparison with Holland and everything else is being done for the reason to be able to if Hojlund scores 20 goals next season and Holland scores 40, they'll say it was a failure because he didn't do what Holland did, which of course is the disgrace to scale it that way. So this is already prepping him to make him conform to impossible standards. He's a very, very good young striker, and like same thing with Jadon Sancho, playing the best United team he could possibly have played in the last few years, with a great coach who knows how to develop young players. So both him and PSG, that was their first choice striker. Second choice was Gonçalo Ramos, of course, which PSG have went and now signed. United like Randall Colomani too. Was it 62 million plus add-ons pounds? I mean, it's not pennies, but it's still below the upper echelons of. It's not Nicolas Pepe. It's not, even Darwin Nunez. So he's a young striker, and he's a young striker you badly need, and I trust Ten Hag's judgment.
Yeah, look, I think he's a good. He's a project signing, isn't he? I think, like, when you look at how
Well, United have been looking at him for a long time, to be fair. You know, I mean, not an agent that rung up and
Yeah.
said, "Here, do you want my client?" You know, this has been a process. You know, he switched the keys for us. You know, earlier in the year, this has been a process that had been lining up for quite a while, and the kid really wanted to come. So, um, you know, I'm excited to see what he brings.
Yeah, so am I. I think, look, I think like, the fact he's 20 is his physical presence, his direct nature, his pace. You know, I think he presses from the front as well. He works very hard. I think from that perspective, Phil, I think that's where I'm excited by the sign. I think it's a project sign. I think he's someone like, look, if you can get him off the ground running, you know, we could have him for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years, you know, because of his age. He could be someone who could take us into the future. Victoria's Secrets came in with a question there. It says, what would be
Oh,
an acceptable goal tally for Highlands for a season?
you know, I think it's hard to say. It depends how much he plays, depends where he plays and all that there. But I think if he scores 15 goals in the Premier League next season, that'd be a very successful season. United need to be getting more goals, need to be getting more variety of goals. Um, he'll play an United team that creates chances. So I think anything above 15 goals in his first season is a really good season.
Yeah, I think like 50, I'd say 15 to 20 goals, I think, in all competitions would be good. I think, especially, like, look, I think Rashford will chip in. You know, Rashford chip in with goals next year. I'd like to see Bruno to start getting back on the score sheet again. Mason Mount is a goal scoring midfielder as well. I'd like to see Anthony as well. You know, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of times Anthony could have scored goals last season where he kind of second guessed himself. I'd like to see him have a bit more belief in himself, and get a few more goals. But look, I think it it's better to. I think if we get him in and he plays well and he fits the system, everyone else get the best out of everyone else's game. Because when we had Ronaldo, as great as nostalgic as it was, and like, look, we all loved when he came back because it brought back kind of good memories. The style of play changed, and like Rashford's tally suffered, Bruno's tally suffered, all these other players' tally suffered. We look the season after when everyone, like when he left, everyone else's game raised and everyone else chipped in with goals, Rashford especially. So we get a natural number 9 who works hard and fits that system. I think similar to when, obviously, I remember a couple of years ago Chelsea had Diego Costa up front. He brought players into play, and he had Eden Hazard chip in with goals and players like Willian and stuff like that as well. You know, if you have that right striker and gives you the right balance, they can give you a bit of everything. You know, I think it'll definitely help the system massively. And again, he's young, so like we've only seen a bit of him, and the fact that he's at that age where he can be developed. I mean, the fact we've very good coaches, and like last year, Benny McCarthy had a very good impact on Marcus Rashford's intelligence in the game. So, look, if Benny McCarthy can get a hold of Hoyland and develop him like how he developed Rashford last year, I think we will be in good stead.
Yeah, look, I think he's coming to a club that maybe in the previous years it was hard to develop at United because so many of the things that you need for a human being to develop, it's not just about football, it's about the things that are going on in their personal life. It's about, I mean, we've seen this with Dali Ali, we saw it on Ramsdale yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's great to see players finally coming out and talking about this. But there's so many variables that goes into development. You know, physiological development, there's technical development, there's mental development. United haven't always been in a situation where they've had a football department equipped to deal with the vicissitudes of life for young players that affect them. I mean, maybe, you know, United, it's you see, to look at Mason Greenwood's a perfect example. You know, things happen anyway, but there's lots of young players that need proper help, proper intervention at a young age to avoid bad outcomes. And United again, I go back to the likes of Ferguson. You know, what people always ask, what would have happened to Gaza? You know, if Fergie had got a hold of him at a young age, and it's similar with Ten Hag in the sense that I feel that United as a football club now are have progressed in lots of different areas to make sure that all the variables that affect young players off the field are being managed properly. Like I mentioned this about the tour, the emphasis is getting the balance right between commercial promotion and letting young players be human beings. I mean, you see this with Garnacho. I mean, you very rarely see Garnacho do interviews, very rarely see him front and centre on any commercial projects. And this hasn't always been the case at United, and I think this is something that Ten Hag understands acutely. I mean, he's come from one of the best football clubs in the world for developing young players. So, you know, and Danish players too. So I think he knows exactly what needs to be done for these young players, because the pressure that Hojlund's going to be under at United will be unlike anything else he's experienced. The focus that he's going to be under. So I think United will have done a lot of homework on his, you know, his mental capabilities, his mental strength, and you know what type of personality he has. And I feel like this is a signing, like a few others, where it's a football signing and it's a result of proper evaluation, scouting, that's being done by a competent football department and being decisions that are being made by the right people. So I think he'll be alright.
And I think, look, as well, if you look at Hojlund, I think he's coming into, like you said, a way better environment. And you look at the
100%.
characters we have in the dressing room now, like the likes of Bruno, like he took Garnacho under his wing last season, Casemiro, Lisandro Martinez, Rafael Varane, all season veterans, you know, all players who've won trophies, and they've been in great environments. Look at the environments that Casemiro and Varane would have been in at Real Madrid, like winning mentality. You know, Lisandro Martinez coming from Ajax, one of the best places in the world you can come from in terms of getting a football education. You know, Bruno's been at many clubs and he's been a captain at Sporting and at United. So I think we've good characters in there to look after him. And look again, we've winners in the dressing room now. It's something that we haven't had in the last couple of years. We have a question in from Dylan. He says, Phil, how long until Greenwood is back involved in the first team setup? Looking likely he'll be reintegrated in the next few weeks. My personal opinion on this, I don't think he will come back. I think there's too much aggro, and I think the club, with the way their direction are going now, I just don't see it happening myself. Personally, what do you think?
Mate, I covered this on my podcast about a week ago. And one of the things that I stated on my podcast was I didn't want to discuss this on an open forum.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to do this so I could control my words and choose them very, very carefully and be measured, so I could take back something I didn't do. But deliberately did not do this podcast live, because first of all, I'm not qualified to speak on what happened. Secondly, where you stand on an issue all depends on where you're sitting. So there's going to be a lot of people who have experienced domestic violence that are deeply traumatized by it and triggered by it, and will feel differently to those that haven't experienced it. You know, how you experience things in your life is going to determine how you feel about this. And I don't want to say anything in case it's misinterpreted as an endorsement of Mason Greenwood or criticism or what have you. So I don't think United had done themselves any favours by teasing this announcement. I think it was stupid.
100%.
I think by releasing this statement saying they were going to make a decision before the start of the season was the height of stupidity. Because what they did is they built up anticipation around the decision, made it a talking point on social media, and some people may argue that was what they wanted, but I don't think it helps.
No, it doesn't.
And so what you will see on social media and what you won't see is the people that want to bring Mason Greenwood back. Most of those people will not say anything on social media because they're aware of the inevitable criticism that will come. The people that don't want Mason Greenwood back will say they don't want him back. So it's hard to scale where opinion is at, because these are issues where, I'm talking about amongst the fan base, where a lot of people will have private thoughts that they won't express. I think United just should have made a decision on it.
I think it's too long now, isn't
instead of teasing this decision, this is not a transfer rumour, this is something that's really serious. And, you know, I think when Adidas come out and say something like, we weren't asked, there's a massive telltale sign there, because I think if United were just going to sack Greenwood, why would Adidas need to clarify anything? They just cheat. So that looks to me like Adidas are saying, don't blame me, he's being brought back. We weren't asked, right? Because if you need to bring Greenwood back, and there was, you know, a lot of press reports that you needed run up by Adidas a week before, it's going to imply that they gave consent to him for him to be brought back. If they were going to sack him, then Adidas wouldn't have said anything because, to be honest, it would have reflected well upon them. If he'd have been sacked a week after the stories were United run it by Adidas, because it would have it would imply that Adidas asked United to sack him. Now you look at how long Adidas took to get rid of Kanye West. So the idea that anything Mason Greenwood did would result in them telling them not to bring him back is absurd. These are raw capitalist companies. They have no moral compass. They don't care. And of course he's also a Nike athlete, not an Adidas athlete. They did drop him. But to me, I saw that video by the way. To me, I don't have any inside track on it. There's obviously discussions about him in America from people inside the football club, which have the right to remain anonymous and not broadcast, and to remain off the record, which I won't do. And to be honest, there was, difference of opinion. Not everyone agreed on this. So there was certainly lots of people inside United who felt that he shouldn't be brought back, that he would pretty much guaranteed to re-offend in some sense, maybe not exactly the same offence, but he's a troubled kid. So, it's hard to get an exact read on it. But I think, I suspect United will bring him back, because if they were going to sack him, I think they would have already. And I think the fact that Adidas wanted to get out in front of that and say, no one asked us about it, is an implication. And I'm pleased, if you're an aggregate account listening to this, do not tweet anything about that I'm claiming this or claiming that, because this is one thing I do not want taken out of context, because it will infuriate me. I don't care if you deliberately take me out of context on a transfer rumour, it's irrelevant to me, but this is something that's really serious. And I really don't like talking about it, because I'm just an idiot on this topic, and it's really a very delicate situation, and my suspicion is they'll bring him back.
Yeah, it's a delicate conversation. I think. We all have
right, no problem, mate. You're not the first person to ask. I'm just saying, for me, it's just a really, really difficult situation, because domestic violence, I think the statistic is 1 in 2 women that are murdered at the hands of their partner. This is a fucking serious issue, mate, right? This is not just brush it off, because I'm a man. I've never felt intimidated in a physical way in a relationship with my partner, ever. I have no idea what it's like to be a woman in that situation. And women face violence, domestic violence everywhere, every single day. And if you actually sit down and talk to them, it's really quite shocking how often they found themselves in situations in their life, whether in a relationship or at a party or something, where they've been physically or sexually assaulted. I never asked those questions, actually, until the whole Me Too thing happened. And I asked my wife at the time, and I couldn't believe some of the stuff that she had told me. I never knew. And I then found out that a lot of women have these stories. And as men, we just don't understand this, because we don't find ourselves in this situation. Yeah. So I think it's something that deserves to be dealt with extremely sensitively. And I don't know what the right thing to do is, man. I really don't.
Yeah, look, you like to think that there's responsible people there that'll make a decision and take everyone's kind of opinions into account. One question that we did get, Phil, was regards to, obviously, we 2 games this weekend. It's kind of odd that we've seen it last season as well, that we played 2 friendlies kind of right before the season started. We've Lens and then we've Bilbao on Sunday. Where do you what are you looking for now? Because obviously we've a game next Monday. We've kind of more of a week in preparation. What we should be looking for now in these last 2 games? So considering we're a week out from the Premier League start.
Yeah, and I honestly think that the last 2 results will probably influence how Ten Hag goes about these games. I have a feeling that the Bilbao game will be largely comprised of the team that will look to start the season on Monday. I think what we'll see in these games, rather than a mix of players, I think what you'll see is a team that he is largely thinking about starting next against Wolves. Play one of these games, and I think it'll probably be the Bilbao game. Maybe the Lens game, I don't know, because it's at Old Trafford and he won't want the players travelling, I don't know. But like you said, we did this in America. They played Wrexham, then they played Real Madrid the next day, and this is partly because Ten Hag is essentially managing both teams. I know Travis Binion took the team in San Diego from the sideline, but Ten Hag has a huge influence over who plays, who doesn't play. United are also having to be better about using the academy to supplement the transfer budget of the first team, which is something that Chelsea have done, which is something that City have done. So getting these players game time and exposure isn't just about prepping them for the season, it's about selling them. We saw this with Nathan Bishop, who just went to Sunderland after coming back from the US, and a number of young players, have done that this season too. So I think I think one of those games will be made up of the team that largely will expect to start against Wolves, and I think that Ten Hag's going to want to win that game, because I don't think he wants to go into the season having lost. I mean, if you count Wrexham as a result, even if you don't, his last 3 pre-season games.
Yeah, definitely not. And look, if you look at the 2 games, obviously I think Bilbao are the stronger opposition, and you look at the way they play, they're kind of a defensive counter-attacking team. If you're preparing for Wolves, you're probably looking at that Bilbao game, you're probably saying you'd like to put out your strongest lineup. That's not me saying it because I'm going up Sunday that I'd like to see the first team, but like you would expect that he would play that squad. But three quick fire questions before we finish. Mm-hmm. Prediction for where we finish in the league. How are we doing in the cups? And then the final one, player of the season.
It's hard to say because so much depends on injuries and what have you. I know a lot of people say City can't be caught, but Arsenal were 8 points clear of them in April, and nobody saw that coming. Ten Hag has to improve next season. I think for Arteta, it would have been better to finish 3rd or 4th going into this season, improve upon that by finishing maybe 2nd. He still would have been able to spend the money that he spent, but now Arsenal are in a really tricky situation, because for them the only thing that's going to signify improvement is winning the Premier League or the Champions League, which is something they've never done. I mean, AC Milan into Milan, were in a semi-final last season. Milan got the Champions League final, so there's no reason why Arsenal United shouldn't be looking to go really deep in that competition. The question for Arsenal is, can they handle the pressure of expectation, which is the first time Arteta's really had that next season? I don't think they'll finish 2nd next season, despite the money they've spent. So I think Ten Hag next season has to do a couple of things. I think he has to win a major trophy outside the Carabao Cup. I'm not even sure the FA Cup would be enough, but maybe if he won an FA Cup and got to a Champions League semi-final or something, he has to get to at least a Champions League quarter-final for me. Anything less than that's a failure. United cannot have another repeat of losing to Liverpool and City by conceding 7 and 6. That has to be gone completely out of their game, right? So if you lose away to City, it's competitive. If you lose away to Liverpool, it's competitive. So I want to see, I know that famous stat about not winning away to the top 6. Those are things United must improve upon next season. Yeah. If they get goals from outside of Rashford, where they're not so dependent upon 3 or 4 players. I mean, the difference with United last season when they didn't have Martinez, Casemiro, Rashford right down the middle. Rashford largely played on the left, but was just enormous. I think they're better equipped to deal with injuries this season. They're better equipped to deal with rotation, so I expect more consistency. And I would have to say that Ten Hag has dealt with every problem that's come his way, exceptionally well. So I expect United to improve next season. I expect them to be more consistent. And look, they have to be within touching distance of the leaders. If it's Manchester City, we expect it will be within 5-6 games to go of the season. So if they're in a title race but don't win the title, and I would consider that improvement, and they have to make sure that they are a serious threat in the Champions League by going deep. I mean, Chelsea won it a couple of years ago. Why can't they do that?
Look, and it depends how the rest of this window goes. We get a striker and we get Amrabat in. I think Amrabat gives us amazing depth in midfield, and it gives us tactical flexibility as well in terms of going 4-4-2 or going 4-5-1 or whatever way we can do it as well. So like I think getting him in will definitely help that as well. I think for me, I think if we're gonna sustain a challenge in the league, like you said, I think challenge City, challenge Arsenal. I think for me, I want to win that FA Cup this season. I think the way we lost it last year was heartbreaking. And the fact, look, I know they cheated to get the treble, but I'd love for us to go out and win one of them major trophies.
Yeah, I want to say something on that, right? Because most of the stuff I put online about City's 115 charges is just really to wind City up, right? What City did was essentially dope the financial football club to put them on an equal financial footing to the top clubs around the world. But there's nothing City did that wasn't beyond the financial reach of Manchester United. But United's incompetence is the reason why City have a gap. And so it can get really, it can get a bit weak, constantly using the 115 charges as an excuse. Before you can talk about City's money, United have to match them everywhere else. They have to match them in terms of their commitment, in terms of their competence, in terms of their ideals, in terms of the values of the football club, their priorities, all these things, right? Yeah. And they don't. United are a football club run, and as we saw, it's only recently that we saw the changes, with a whole different payoff function. The function was to make money for the Glazers and give the illusion that, on the field success mattered as much as making money. It didn't. But now they can no longer do that. They can't thread that needle anymore of making money and getting dividends whilst not being successful. So they're forced to act this way. United are behind City because of their incompetence, not because City financially doped, right? And we have to face up to this fact, right? So everything City have done, United could have done, right? Yeah. So for me, I want to make sure United get that out of their lexicon, the 115 charges. Like I just said, Arsenal were 8 points clear of them. Jurgen Klopp went toe-to-toe with them for 4 years, right? Won a league, lost 2 by the thinnest of margins, won a Champions League, right? So this can become a bit self-defeating, where we're constantly looking at these 115 charges. Let United get their own shit together. Let them run the football club properly so that you don't give those players excuses for failures, because they'll be sitting thinking that too. It's okay for us to lose because we can talk about the 115 charges. No. Go out there and win. Right? So, there's all sorts of financial skullduggery that goes on in football. There's dirty money everywhere. Right? And United would take
money on the road, never mind
everywhere. Right? Everywhere in football, right? And let's be honest about this, FFP was a competitive barrier. It was not about financial fair play. It was a competitive barrier to stop the likes of Abramovich and City and other football clubs from coming in and pushing up the price of players and pushing up wages, right? And so that the status quo would remain the same. UEFA had a vested interest in this because the big football clubs were the big revenue generators, right? So when you had Andriy Makachla from Russia and all this coming in and upsetting the apple cart, they didn't like it, right? When big football clubs had a financial advantage over everyone else and they could dictate the market, that was fine. But as soon as someone else came to the party, they didn't like it, right? Because they couldn't match that type of spending. I'm not saying there shouldn't be financial controls in football. I'm not saying they shouldn't be adhered to. They should. But let's be fair about this, right? If City players were genetically doping to give a performance advantage on the pitch, okay. But City can only buy 11, 18 world-class footballers, right? What about the rest of them? They've won one European Cup, right, in their history, which was last season. They were bought in 2009. So 13 years between them and PSG, a couple of billion apiece, couldn't buy a European Cup. Think about the teams that have won it since then, right? So for me, I think this whole financial doping thing, it's fine to wind up City fans because, they're so easy. But deep down, we have to accept the fact that the reason why United are behind City It's got nothing to do with City financially doping. It's because of United's rank and competence.
Yeah, 100%. It's down to what they've done upstairs and what them lads in America have done, and they've taken us from the most competitive, like they had the best stadium in the world, had the best manager ever, and then to what we have now. It's just like, look.
Do you think Real Madrid are not winning European Cups because City are financially doping?
No, they
Of course not.
No,
Because
City had a
City,
better
Real
team.
Madrid weren't infested with incompetence.
No,
So all those other teams that have won European Cups since City were bought had no problems being able to win them, despite City financially doping. Liverpool were able to win the league, despite City financially doping, because they were run competently, right? Because they had a football network inside that club. They had proper incentives. They had proper scouting. They had a proper manager, proper coaching, proper control parameters, proper management. They didn't have a fucking idiot at the top turning around and saying things like, "This is adult Disneyland," right? That this is foisting players on managers because the numbers make sense. Klopp and Guardiola would have walked from United, right? Because they wouldn't have tolerated this shit. So when you're talking about people like Ralph Rangnick and you're talking about people like Solskjaer, the reason why those people were there is because people like Klopp and Guardiola wouldn't take that job under those circumstances because it was impossible to succeed. So like I said, it's only now that United are being forced to work this way that you're seeing change, because they have no choice, because they can't afford to do it any other way. But we are where we are because since Ferguson left, their power was usurped, went upstairs to people that did not know what the fuck they were doing, who really didn't care about football success. In fact, were judged them by their own words. Woodward turned around and said, "We don't have to be successful on the pitch to be successful off it." Do you think if you knocked Joe Glazer's door tomorrow and said, "Joe, here's a check for 500 million, or here's the Premier League," which one would he take from you?
it's 500 million.
Okay, so what he values is in dollars and cents, okay? Not in trophies. If you can do both, great. Ferguson was able to do both. He was able to bring them money and bring them success on the cheap. But once they lost Ferguson, all the competence walked out the door, right? And these Comanches came in and run United and were judged on how commercially successful United were. Woodward did that Adidas deal 2 years in, all that, right? The money was rolling in because Ferguson's success was still so recent. But by the time they got to the end of it, it was all drying up because this football is a short memory, right? These kids, you go to a tournament here in San Diego, you'll see maybe 10 United shirts, 100 City shirts, right?
Yeah.
So these kids that are playing FIFA and all this, the game is growing exponentially in important markets like the US, and as that exponential growth is happening, United are shit, right? So here's the thing. They milked it for all it was worth. And now they're in a situation where they're saying, the cow's got no more milk. So either you run this competently or you turn it over. Because there's no more money here. To pay dividends, to go out and make big signings, to appease fans by making a big signing which works for about 2 weeks, all that shit. Right? So United are where they are because of rank and competence. Real Madrid were 14-time European Cup winners because they're run like a football club, and City's financial doping was not an impediment to them.
Yeah, and it comes down to, again, what them scumbags over there are doing. And look, hopefully, like we said, Phil, there's a resolution where it's Ratcliffe, Qatar, or look, I don't care. I don't care who buys us. I'm at a point now where I just want them to go, and then look, whoever comes in, we discuss that then, and we give them a fair chance at a one on the top.
Manchester United is a very lucrative football club if it's run properly, where resources are diverted into the proper, institution, the proper parts of the football club, the proper in investment in technology and in coaching, in facilities, and making sure you stay at the top of the market with ingenuity, making sure that you don't, all these things are important. Sports science, all that. United will be fine. They don't need a wealthy City fans and Newcastle fans will not criticize their owners because they know that their success is impossible without them, right? They know that if they go, they stop winning football games they couldn't win before they came. United don't need this, right? I'm not advocating for anybody, but what I'm saying is City need that because they could not get where they are without that. There's no question about that. That's obvious, right? But United, on the other hand, you and I could own Manchester United. As long as we don't saddle it with debt, United pay their own bills, right? So United don't need wealthy benefactors to come in and put billions into the football club so that they can buy players. And they could easily, with the debt cleared, borrow the money against the football club's revenue to build a new stadium, no problems, right? But what they need is someone that has a duty of care to the football club, that realises that the revenue it generates should be reinvested back into it and not back into the pockets of people siphoning it off.
Yeah, and look, with that, I'd say the best thing we can hope for is thank God there's legislation there now that no one can buy the club like the Glazers done, and it's funny they called it an anti-Glazer clause. That's how bad them people are. But on that, and we are going to wrap up there, Phil.
Yes,
it's been absolutely great chat this evening.
My pleasure.
For everyone who hasn't seen the 1958 protest announcement, the link will be in the video description. They will be doing the protests at the United Trinity 6:30 next week. For the Wolves game, and then consequently to sit in after the Forest game as well. And make sure to check out their Twitter as well, because they do announcements there, not only just with the protests, but there's Twitter spaces going on there as well. So do check that out. And as always, guys, do like and subscribe as well. We do appreciate everyone's support since we've changed over the Fully United Centric podcast. And again, we always do appreciate Phil taking time to come on as well. But
my pleasure.
We'll see you Sunday at the match.
Yes,
we will be over there. And we'll see you later.
Folks, see you.